Hi everyone, this is Dohnanyi, and today's video is going to be all about piano technique repertoire for intermediate players. I posted a video, I think 2 weeks ago, where I was talking about general piano repertoire for intermediate piano players, and I got some comments under that video where you asked me to talk about specific exercises, studies, and general piano technique repertoire for that level. So I compiled all the pieces that I find will really help you develop your technique if you're at the intermediate level and will help you get to the next stage. So if you're interested in listening to which pieces I selected and also some of the pieces that I practiced when I was an intermediate player, then keep on watching. So before we get into the video and the actual pieces, I want to make one remark which I find incredibly important. I will be talking about technical exercises only, but when you're practicing studies and technical exercises and anything technical for that matter, it's so important that you still keep the musical side of it going. What I mean by that is, even if you're practicing a purely technical exercise, there is no phrasing to it, there is no real melodic line to it, it is only geared towards you moving your fingers in a specific way, I would still emphasize that you need to create a phrase, create an atmosphere, put in some musicality. And that is so important because if you put in the music while you're practicing a technical exercise, your technique is going to improve even more. It is more fun to play in a musical way. It is better for your sound creation because in the end, when you're practicing technique, you're practicing how to press a key in order to create a certain sound. So you don't want to get your fingers used to pressing the key in a very harsh, unmusical way. You want to get your fingers used to pressing the keys within a technical exercise in a way that creates a beautiful musical phrase. So really my most important tip when talking about any study, any exercise, even something as dry as Hanon exercises, for example, is make them musical. Start it a little softer, create a little crescendo, create a little diminuendo in the end. You can think of what suits you best and what you find most beautiful and most suitable for that exercise, but put in phrases, put in the music, put in emotion. This is what music is, even when breaking it down to the most basic technical level. So having said that, the first cycle of studies or exercises that I would mention are the 25 studies by Burgmüller. It is his opus 100 and they are called 25 easy and progressive studies. And I believe that they are perfect if you're at the intermediate level. The first ones might even be on the easier side, but you can really grow your technique with them. They are fairly simple, still very beautiful to play, and cover basic technical skills that you will need later on. The next composer that I want to mention is one that immediately comes to mind when talking about technical exercises and studies, and it is Czerny. Czerny, a student of Beethoven, really focused on creating many exercises and many studies for pianists in order to improve the technique. And now if you are at the intermediate level, I would suggest the 168 bar exercises. It is his opus 821. Pretty impressive that he has such high opus numbers. Anyway, this is opus 821, and I believe that these really are the perfect studies for an intermediate player. They are super short, as I said, 8 bar exercises, but because they are so short and so many, they really cover every possible technical difficulty that you will encounter in repertoire, and you can work on them in a short and effective way. So I would really recommend, if you're looking to getting into different technical difficulties, to look into the 168 bar exercises by Czerny. It's his opus 821. Now, Czerny really has countless exercises, and I could mention many opus and many studies in particular, but I only want to focus on 2 more, especially because we're talking about the intermediate level. The one is the opus 139. Those are on the simpler side also, and the next one is opus 299. those can already get a bit harder, but I believe that these are exercises that you can definitely work on if you are an intermediate player. Just because we're talking about Czerny, I think it's also interesting to mention his Opus 377 and Opus 740, although especially the 740, I would say already has quite advanced exercises and studies. But as I said, the 168 bar studies and the 139 and 299 are great cycles to look into as an intermediate player. Again, Czerny immediately reminds us of exercises, studies, but please, when you're practicing those studies, don't think of it as pure technical music, or basically no music, just technical exercise. Think of it as music. It is so beautifully composed, and it will help you so much in your development of your technique if you keep the music in those pieces. The next cycle that I want to mention is by Heller, and it is his Opus 47. It is a cycle that I also find very suited for intermediate pianists. Next up, we have the 60 selected studies by Cramer. Also a great cycle to look into if you're on the intermediate level. I find them very practical because, again, they are very short. Many of them are under a minute and cover so many different types of technical difficulties in a very effective way. So definitely look into the Cramer studies as well. The next study that I would like to mention is by Claude Debussy, and it is his number 11, which has the title Pour les Arpèges Composés. This one I find great because it is not too hard. I find it's very suited for intermediate players, and also it focuses on syncopated arpeggios, which we find very often in piano literature, and also just general hand positioning. So this one specifically will help you with getting your hand into the right position very quickly because you're working on those syncopated arpeggios throughout the study. So this one specifically is one that I want to include in this video for intermediate piano technique repertoire. Now we're getting to a very famous composer that is not only famous for studies at all, which is Johannes Brahms. Johannes Brahms is actually not famous for composing studies, but he wrote the 51 exercises for the piano, which I find incredibly useful. And I think that they are great to look into. I think that they combine Brahms' amazing musicality and his amazing vision of sound and what the piano can create just musically, and also focus on real technical difficulties, because as you know, if you've played any piece by Brahms, his pieces can be quite uncomfortable to play. So I would definitely recommend looking into his 51 exercises that are very useful. Next up, I want to mention Liszt's Opus 1. Now, Liszt is a composer that we usually do not connect with intermediate piano repertoire because it's usually very virtuoso and pretty difficult. However, this Opus 1 is a cycle that is not known that much and actually almost not played at all, although it is great for intermediate players because it is not as hard as the other things that he has written, and it covers many technical difficulties, and true to Liszt's form, it is geared towards the very virtuoso playing, however on a slightly easier level. So if you like Liszt, if you want to play some pieces by Liszt later on and you're trying to work on your technique with that in mind, then I would definitely recommend that you look into his Opus 1. The next cycle that I want to mention is by Moszkowski, and it is his Opus 72. I myself played some of the Moszkowski studies and I found them very helpful when I was developing my technique as a young girl, so I will definitely recommend this one as well. One cycle that I would like to mention is by Kullak. Kullak is actually not that known, and it is something that I also discovered a little bit later on in my piano studies. I didn't actually work on that as an intermediate player. However, I wish I would have, because it is his school of octave playing, which is his Opus 48. And I find it very helpful, very effective. It's really to the point. You really learn to focus on the thumb only when playing octaves, and it really helps develop your octave technique. And as I said, I only discovered it with a new teacher that I had at that time, but I wish that I would have practiced that earlier already. So I would definitely recommend looking into that if you're trying to improve your octave technique as an intermediate player. Another cycle of studies and exercises that I want to mention is by Dohnanyi. It is called Essential Exercises, and I think this is one that quite a lot of people practice. It is very effective as well. It has shorter exercises that cover a variety of technical difficulties, and one that is definitely geared towards intermediate piano players. Towards the end, I want to mention Hanon. Hanon is a little bit of a controversial topic, I find. I don't really know why, but I think that there are pianists that kind of swear by it and love it and say that you really need to practice it in order to develop your technique and in order to get somewhere. And then there are other people that say it is almost counterproductive to practice Hanon and you should not even look at it. I personally am kind of in the middle. I did practice Hanon when I was younger, and I definitely found it helpful. However, I did not practice it religiously or anything like that. But I do think that I should include it in this video because I did find it helpful. It does cover uncomfortable technical positions in every possible position that you can have, since you're going through all the key combinations usually in his exercises. And yes, they are not the most musical exercises, but as I mentioned in the beginning, make them musical. Put in phrasing, put in dynamics, make them sound good. Don't look at them as purely technical exercises. And I don't think you should be practicing Hanon only, but I definitely don't think that you're doing anything wrong if you're including this in your piano technique routine when warming up or when developing your technique as an intermediate player. So personally, I would recommend including Hanon exercises in your technique routine. And finally, I want to mention 2 Chopin studies. Now, when we're talking about Chopin studies, we're kind of leaving the intermediate realm, I would say. However, Opus 25 number 1 and Opus 25 number 2, I think are the easiest studies and the most doable studies in a way. So I do want to include those 2 in this video because I believe that Chopin studies can be so helpful and are really great pieces to develop your technique. If some of you have been watching me for a longer time, you know that my teacher used to swear by Chopin studies. We had to practice many different Chopin studies and bring them to his lessons. So I definitely went through those Chopin studies and many more as well. But I think that those are 2 great ones to begin with. I also am a fan of, because this is how I was taught and I found that very helpful, already looking into other harder Chopin studies, but in a very easy way, just by doing certain exercises or just by playing them slowly. I have made several videos on Chopin studies in the past. I've made videos on Opus 10 number 1, Opus 10 number 2, Opus 25 number 2, Opus 10 number 9. So you will find different ones and you can see what I mean exactly by how to practice them, because I go more in depth in that video. So if you're interested in that, definitely check those videos out. But I think that in this video about intermediate technical repertoire, it is fair to mention Opus 25 number 1 and 2, because I think that is doable if you really work at it as an intermediate piano player. And in the end, I want to mention Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, he is not a technical exercise kind of composer at all. However, I do want to mention it because while I was preparing for this video and I was thinking of which pieces to include, I was thinking about something that Glenn Gould said once. And he said that his entire warm-up is playing Bach and not playing any type of study. And there is definitely some truth to it, that warming up with Bach can be very effective, very helpful, and can definitely improve your technique because you're working on finger independence like with no other piece because of the whole polyphonic element of the music. And just, of course, playing Bach is very challenging and very helpful for anything else that you will play. So I just want to include this here as a thought that maybe looking at his inventions, which I would say are okay for an intermediate level, can also be a great technical help and technical support, even though it's technically not a study or a technical exercise. It has the title Invention, but still I think that playing those can be very helpful for the development of your technique. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and all the exercises that I shared. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if you've practiced some of these that I mentioned or if some were new to you. And also, if I didn't mention some, please add them in the comments, because many people are going through the comments and get more ideas from your very valuable additions. So definitely add anything that I did not mention but that you find is important and that I missed and that is helpful. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. That would help me a lot. And I will see you again in my next video next week. Bye.